Hello, everyone. I'm Danielle once again. I'm here with Emily, and this is going to be week 4 of JavaScript with Twilio. Hopefully Margaret joins us. She is our Twilio representative that's been working with us to present this camp and all that. Yeah, but without further ado, let's get started. So yeah, once again, this is the intro to JavaScript, week 4 with Twilio. The first thing we're going to be going over is last week's homework. So I actually have to reshare my screen.
And I'll also send a update, let people on Discord know that we're live right now.
Okay, cool. Let's just open up my terminal. Let's open. How was your day, Emily?
It was pretty good. I guess not much happened, but it's been a slow day, kind of tired, but it's all right. How about you? How have you been?
It's been okay. I literally do not have power in my house. I barely have power. My light, literally we had to stop the stream early yesterday, which was so embarrassing. We actually probably have to delete some videos, I think. YouTube, now that I think about it. Because, wait, where is this? I'm in the wrong week. Whoopsies. Because I don't know, I have an animal living in my apartment, the walls of my apartment. I think it's a squirrel. And we think that he chewed through some wires, and now we don't have power in our lights.
What? Oh no.
And yeah, our lights don't work, and we whatchamacallit? What was I gonna say? Oh yeah, some of our outlets are going out, so yeah, it's not fun. But yeah, I'm gonna show you guys what I had after week 3. After doing week 3's homework. This is what I had. And so yeah, that's what what your homework should look like. You're gonna build an analog clock last week. And I just want to open the one that we're working on. So yeah. Oh wait, this is the wrong thing. Okay, whatever. I'm just gonna make a copy. I'm just gonna basically go over the code. So last week, your code should have looked something like this. Let me zoom out a little bit. It's too zoomed out though. Maybe I'll just full screen. Your code should have looked like this at the end of week 2. Here we have the radio buttons for the time zone. That should stay the same. And then this was the JavaScript for the time zone stuff. And the function that shows the time. And then you should have also had this style, this CSS file that just styles everything. Yeah, so week 2 was pretty simple, but we're gonna build off of that in week 3. So here, let me show you guys what I added. So the first thing that you want to do, let me minimize this again. I'm not gonna go all the way through everything because this was a big project and it'll take a while. But yeah, the first thing you're supposed to do was add this line of code up here that links your JavaScript file to your HTML file. And then in your JavaScript, you're supposed to, let's see, copy and paste everything. Yeah. And then this is what you're code would have looked, what your page would have looked like after step 1. Then you would have added this. Oh, I'm in the wrong file. Okay, so now I've got everything. Okay. Yeah, so then the next thing you would do is in your HTML file, add a div for a class clock with its ID set to clock. And then from there, you would move back to your style file. That rhymes. I didn't mean it to rhyme. And you define a selector for the clock class. So where is that? Okay, down here we have a selector for the clock class, making a square, so like height and width, any size just has to be equal. And then I set the background color to this like white color with full opacity. That's just what the computer did automatically for me using VS Code, but you could just also do like #FFF and it would do the same thing. And then the next thing you would do, set a background color for your clock. We did that. And then at that point, your code would look like this. Just one square on your page. And then you would set the border radius to 50%. And the border to 10 pixels solid black. Well, you actually didn't have to add a border, but I recommended it. And then you would just set the positions of the items in this class to relative. This basically just helps glue the elements together that you're going to put on top of the clock. So yeah, after that, you would just have this circle with a black border around it. And then next, we wanted to add this clock after feature. So we set the content to 0 so that the computer knows that there's not going to be any text in here. Height and width, any size really, just small and square. Border radius to 50% to make it a circle. And then background color, I chose black because that's just like traditional for a clock. And we set the position to absolute so that it sticks together with this element, which has its position to relative. And we set the Z index to 100. You could put it to any high number that you want. Just make sure that it's above all of the clock hands that you're going to create later. And this just makes sure that this like circle that's going to go in the middle of the clock sits on top of all of the other clock elements. Next, we just wanted to set the top and the left to 50% so that this circle sits in the middle of the clock on that page. And we had to translate it by half of its size to the left and up because to adjust it so that it's exactly in the center, because these position the element on based on like the element's top and left and not based on the element center. So this just centers the element. Okay, let's see.
I guess we have a comment from the chat. Yeah, someone's finally back at the live streams. Welcome back. And they also have a question. Why do you have 28,852 unread emails?
Because
you guys exposing Danielle's inbox.
Who is that? Who is that? I need to know who it is. That's Liz, I think.
Yeah.
I have many personal issues. We're not gonna talk about that today.
Oh, it's Liz. Hi, Liz. Sorry, didn't recognize your Twitch username, but welcome.
Way to literally throw me under the bus, Liz. Thanks.
Yeah. Let me to call Danielle out. Oh my gosh.
It's at least like every single time that I share my screen, someone makes a comment on that. I don't open an email unless it seems like I need to open it. Like I get a lot of emails like from places that I shop and stuff so that I know if they're having like a major sale, but I'm not going to open it unless they are truly having a major sale and I'm actually like kind of interested. You know, like And then also like, yeah, I get a lot of like, not spam, but just like emails that I'm not going to read.
Mhm.
So I promise I read my important emails.
That's
Don't worry
what's
about
important. Yeah.
it. I read my emails except for the ones from Emily.
Oh.
I'm just kidding. Me and Emily don't know. Okay, yeah, back to this. This is what your clock would look like at this point. Just a circle with a little circle in the middle. Next, we have to add the digits. So that's what's going on over, actually, no, going back into our HTML. So we define divs for numbers 1 through 12 inside of the clock div tags. These elements have class set to number and then their actual number. And then you can see inside we have the digits that are going to get printed out to the screen. And then from there, we go to our style file. I need to stop saying that. Our CSS file. We define a selector for each one of these numbers. So this targets all of the digits. Let's see, clock.number, yeah. This targets all the numbers. We just set its position to absolute so that it's glued to that clock. Width and height, we just set to 100% so that they're like taking up as much space as they should given their text size. And then the align to center so that we just have our elements centered in the clock. Otherwise, they wouldn't be on the clock. Next, we set the color to black so that you can see them. You can make it any color you want as long as it doesn't match the background color of the clock. And I set the font size relative to like the page size, which is actually no, it's not it's I think REM is just like, here it explains it right here. It's applied to the M unit of the font. So it has to do with the font. I don't remember why I did that. I made this a very long time ago, but you can make it any font size you want. You can use pixels or whatever, or percent, I don't care. And we created this rotation variable, which we're going to use to rotate our digits around the clock so that they are in position. Yeah, and then at this point, your numbers would just be overlapped in that one spot at the top of the clock. We're also using this transform function, which is actually going to utilize that variable rotation and do the work to rotate it around the clock. Yeah, let's see where I explain that. This is the next one. Yeah, so to move the digits to their respective positions on the clock, we could individually position them, but that would be really annoying. So we have this rotation variable. So yeah, this line of code rotates all divs inside the clock class and any class with the number in its name to rotate by a varying degree. Right now, this degree is set to 0 for all numbers because in .clock.number, we set the variable to 0. So that applies to all of the number divs, which means that they all have a rotation set to 0. So they're all sitting at the top right now. Okay, so now all that's left to do is assign varying degrees for each of the numbers. Since there are 12 numbers on a clock and a circular clock is 360 degrees, each number will be placed 30 degrees apart. So over here, that's what we're doing. So the first thing we set is number 1 to 30 degrees. So number 12 is like the top of the clock, and that rotation is set to 0, and it's going to stay 0 because we want 12 at the top. That's where it sits on the clock. 1 goes 30 degrees below that, and then 2 goes 60 degrees, so on and so forth. We just rotate around the clock till we get back to 11, which is at negative 30 degrees or 330 degrees from the starting position. Are there any questions about that? Because I was definitely confused about this the first time I did it.
Yeah, if you guys have any questions, you can leave them in the chat, but so far it looks so good. So I guess we can move on.
Okay, so yeah, this is what your page would look like. These are what we just worked on. Okay, what's next? So clock hands. Next, we go back to our HTML file and we add these 3 divs, so the hand hour, hand minute, and hand second. And we add this data tag to them, which basically just allows us to pass some sort of data into our JavaScript. Yeah. Let me repeat this for the minute and the second hand. So then back in our CSS file, we go to .clock.hand. And we're setting the bottom and the left to 50%. Then position to absolute. So once again, it's like glued to that clock. Width 10 pixels and height 40%. These are just like so that it fills like a little less than half of the whatchamacallit, a little less than half the width of the clock so that it's like the same size as a hand. And then next we would set the background color to black because most of the hands are going to be black. So just by default, I set that as black. And then the border top left radius and the border top right radius to 10 pixels, which rounds the edges of the hands on the clock so that, like, as you can see, like they're rounded at the edge instead of pointy or square. They would probably be square by default. And then I set the border of these to be solid white and 1 pixel. You can't really see unless they're overlapped, but when they are overlapped, you'll see that, like, here. Well, I didn't get to that in this point, but when they're overlapped, you can see that border around them. Yeah, and then, okay, so we're going to come back to this later, I think. Let's see. Okay, so the first thing you're going to want to do is translate it -50%. You could do translate -50% or to 0, or you could do translate X. They do the same thing. This just translates the item on the X-axis, and this translates the item using like both axes, but ignores the Y-axis because it's set to 0. And then I think that's it for now. Let's see what the next step is. At this point, it would look like this, I think. Next, we select the second hand, and we set the color to red. We make it a little bit longer than the rest of the hands because the second hand is the longest. And we set its z-index to 12. You could just make it any number that's less than the z-index of the clock after selector and higher than these two because you want the second hand to always sit on top since it's going to be moving the most. And then I created a selector for hand.minute. I'm able to select these, like the way this works is like these are both in, all 3 of these are in the clock div. And then each of these, I think the name is hand second. So if you go into your index file, your index.html file, you see how it's like hand hour. So since there's a space in between them, we have to call the selector like twice to select both of those items. So you just have to make sure that there's no space in between hand and second and hand and minute and hand and hour. And then, yeah, basically just the same thing. Minute hand should sit on top of the hour hand, but below the second hand. And then the hour hand should have the lowest index so that it's below everything. And then, yeah, the minute hand should be the second longest, hour hand should be the shortest and the most stout. And then, yeah, the minute hand should be in the middle for like width, and second hand should be the thinnest. And that's like the most important thing for now. So that's what it would look like at this point. You just have those hands. They don't really do anything yet, but they're sitting at the top. And then finally, we want to get our hands to move. So in our CSS file, oh, wait, are there any questions or are we good?
I think we're good for now. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think a lot of this is just like simple styling for now, but this is like probably the hardest part is incorporating the JavaScript. So we already have this variable called rotation in our clock number, but because we define it within the clock.number selector, it's only exists within any items that have the number class. So let's see, back in here, we have these items all have the number class and they all also have like a number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, whatever. And so since we define it for all items within the number class, the rotation variable that I just mentioned exists for all of these divs, but it only exists within those divs because it's a local variable. If I define this variable outside of the selector, like over here, then we would have a global variable and then we would have issues. But since we are looking at, instead of looking at these, we're looking at these with the hand selector, we can reuse the name of the variable as rotation. If you're worried about like the scope of things, which basically just means where a variable exists, then don't reuse the same name. Like if you're kind of confused on it, but I think that this name is really practical, so I just reused it. But yeah, that's how you know that it's not. That's how you know why it's not being overlapped or like overwritten. But so yeah, these are two different variables, this one and this one. They just have the same name because they're basically doing the same thing. But that was just my personal preference. I told you guys to name it that, but like you could have named it whatever you wanted, or if you still haven't worked on this, you could still name it whatever you want, because I know that was kind of confusing. Anyway, we're going to initialize that variable to 0 so that it's not rotated to begin with. And then where was I? Okay, yeah. So we create that rotation variable, which serves as a variable to hold the number of degrees our hand will be rotated at any given second. So as you can see, this hand is like rotating around the clock every second. So that is because the rotation variable is set to a different degree at every second. So yeah, that's what we do that's why we have that rotation variable. You want to make sure that you define this variable and set it before you set this transform attribute, which I'm going to talk about in the next step. This transform attribute, we used it earlier. That's the reason why this is at the top of the code, even though I added it later, because we're going to add in this rotate function again. So this rotate function takes the variable rotation and multiplies that rotation variable by 1 degree. What we're doing here basically is converting the rotation variable from an integer or a number to a degree. And we do that by multiplying it by 1 degree. So yeah, it's just like a very simple conversion. So because we're referencing a variable, we need to call the var function and then pass our variable as the parameter. Parameter is anything that goes inside parentheses when you call a function. So yeah, we call this variable multiply by 1 degree. And in order to do any calculation in CSS, you need to wrap that calculation with the calc function. So as you can see, yeah, whoops. I have calc right here, and then I surround that entire calculation in the calc function and pass that as the parameter for the function. And then once we are able to make that calculation, we can pass that as the parameter for the rotate function. So this rotate function just rotates any item about its center, I believe. Yeah, about its center, given some degree. And the way CSS works is like if you just separate something by a space, you can pass several attributes or several values to one property. So like as you see in the border line, I'm passing 1 pixel, solid, and white all as attributes for the border. So similarly, in the transform function, I can call translate X, and I can also call rotate in the same line. And it has to be done in the same line because you can't call the same property twice. Does that make sense? I feel like I just rambled a lot.
I guess, does anyone have any questions? You can leave in the chat. But I guess so far, so good. It was a complicated concept, but I think you explained it well.
Well, thank you. Okay, so moving on. Now we have that rotation variable set, and we have a function that calls it so that this element rotates about its center. As you may notice, if you were to play around with this and like set it to 30, the rotation variable, then you would see that like instead of rotating about its end like a normal clock would have its hands rotate, these elements rotate about their center, like to kind of form a circle if you rotate them like 360 degrees. I don't know if that makes sense, but you can see in this picture, they're rotating about their center over here instead of rotating about their end. So that's why we add in this line over here on line 85. It just changes the origin at which the element transforms to its bottom instead of its center. So like if I took out this line, I think I can use a hashtag. No, maybe line. How do you comment in CSS? Maybe it's this. Yeah, it's that. Yeah, if I save that, you would see that this looks all out of whack. But like you could also kind of see that if you were to like try to connect them, it would form a circle. Like it's rotating about its center. This is the only spot that is remaining in the same spot. So that's why you have to add in this line, because then you see they all rotate about their bottom, which is really cool. I didn't think that was going to be able to work well. I was like, no way you can do this, but there's a way. Okay, so now we have our hands rotating, we have our numbers on our clock, and we have the clock like set up. Now we just need to let the hands know when to rotate and how much to rotate by. So this is where our JavaScript comes in. So back to our script.js. I believe this validate form all copied from my week 2. And then we just have, I think I scrapped everything about like the clock basically. So yeah, the next thing you do is create a date variable. And so this variable is going to basically just hold, well, I guess it's not a variable, it's a constant, but this element is going to like hold the date just using the date function in JavaScript. And this just grabs the date on your local machine. So it's 7:29 p.m. on Thursday, February 25th for me. I know those in the Pacific Coast, it's like 4:30 for them.
Yeah.
Lucky you guys. Like pitch black by me and I don't have power. But the next thing you're going to do is create this seconds ratio. So you're going to grab the date and then get seconds. So just get seconds of the date would return like 40 seconds. Like say it's 7:29:40, or I guess it's 7:30 like 02 now. So this would return like 02. And we want to divide that by 60 so that we get a ratio of like basically how many seconds out of like the minute have passed, if that makes sense. So when we get 2 out of 60, like that kind of gives us some insight as to how much we should rotate around the circle. And this will become more clear later. But next, we create this minutes ratio. This minutes ratio grabs the seconds ratio, because when you are creating this clock, you want the hands to rotate not only like if we just did the same thing with the minutes ratio that we did with the seconds ratio, then we like our minute hand would only update every 1 minute. So we incorporate that seconds ratio and divide it by 60 again, so that we are moving the minute hand every single second. And then for the hours ratio, we're adding the hours to the minutes ratio. And the minutes ratio incorporates the seconds ratio. So the hour hand, although you like may barely be able to see it, it is moving every single second. These actually, I don't know why this looks like it isn't moving at all. Maybe this code is messed up. It honestly might be. I know I definitely had one working before. Wait, I'm just curious to see if it moves like a lot when the minute passes.
Yeah, I guess we'll wait.
Week 3. Come on, let's see. No, I guess it's just moving very slowly. That it's like barely.
maybe it's moving very, very slowly. It doesn't like.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That must be it. It's just moving really slowly, which is what it's supposed to do. Anyway, yeah. So it should be moving like a very, both of these should be moving a very, very small amount with every tick. Just like a real clock. But yeah, so when we have these set up, these like basically just give us a ratio so that we are able to get like a degree at which our hands should be moving. So we call this set rotation function. So we're going to define this set rotation function, and it's going to take an element and the ratio. So the element that it's going to take is going to be one of the hands that we just created, so one of the div elements. So that would be second hand, minute hand, or hour hand. These were all defined. Oh, whoops, I forgot to go over this. These were defined earlier. They're global, which just means they're outside of any function, so they could be accessed by any part of the code. So this hour hand we just call document, which is like a variable that, well, not a variable, it's a function basically that incorporates with the index.h the HTML file. And it has this function called query selector. So that's where like our data tag comes in. So yeah, we select that data tag for each one. So the hour hand is the data hour hand, minute hand is the data minute hand, so on and so forth. And this just selects those elements and returns them. So this holds the hour hand element, the div that's associated with the hour hand. So we pass along those hand elements, and then we also pass along those ratios, and we are going to grab the element. So because we named these elements like element in the parameter that we defined it in, this would reference the hour hand, the minute hand, or the second hand. And then we go into its like style, which is the CSS code, and we're setting a property. These are all just like built-in JavaScript functions. So this allows the programmer to like change any property of any element in the attached HTML and CSS code. So we're going to change the rotation element of these properties and then multiply the rotation ratio. So like whatever you get when you divide the seconds, the number of seconds that have passed since the beginning of the minute divided by 60, and you multiply that by 360. So this makes it, I think, a lot easier to visualize, because if you think about it, like if it's at the very end of the second, of the minute, I mean, that means that the second hand is going to be at almost 360 degrees. So the second hand will be up here. Similarly, if only 1 second has passed, it'll be a very small number. So it'll be like 1 degree, I think, if that makes sense. something like that. No, it would be 1 divided by 60, whatever that is, times 360. So it would just be a very small amount. And we're dividing by 60 because there's 60 seconds in a minute. So yeah, I think that's all of the logic behind it. And then we just want to call show time once again so that our clock is updated based on the current time on your computer the second that you refresh that page or open up that page. And then we also set an interval to call that show time function every single second, which is every 1,000 milliseconds. So this way the clock is being updated every 1 second. And then the last thing would just be passing along that global offset variable for the time zone. And I subtracted the offset because I'm ahead of all the time zones that I listed on my time zone form. If you live in the Pacific time zone, you might want to change this to plus, or if you it's up to preference. You could either subtract it or add it depending on whatever you set these. Like if you live in the Pacific coast and you left it as negative, then you'd probably have to set like EST to -3. And then you'd be doing a double subtraction and adding in the end. So yeah, and this is the final result. Eastern time zone is my current time zone, so it won't update. This is Central Standard Time, Mountain Standard Time, Pacific Standard Time, Alaska Standard Time, and Hawaii Aleutian Standard Time. Yeah. Are there any questions about that?
I guess so far, I think everyone's pretty good. Yeah.
Okay, so that's everything for the homework right now. I'm gonna close out of this, and I'm going to stop sharing, and once again, share my notes. I did the wrong thing again. Oh my god. Share.
It's okay. Take your time.
Okay, so yeah, this once again just a screenshot of last week's homework. And yeah, so now we're going to be talking about the final project blog. Emily, do you want to get started?
Yeah, sure, I can get started. So basically for your final project, which is essentially just the accumulation of what you guys...
Emily, I can't hear you.
Oh, oops, sorry, I muted my mic. But I guess I'll start from the beginning. So the final project is essentially what you'll have at the end of these 4 weeks. It'll be the interface where you can switch between the digital and analog clock. So for the kind of like final project is to have that interface and to write a blog about it. So what you're going to do is we'll go over the outline for the blog. And what I recommend you guys do is download Typora. And sorry, my my notifications are going off. But what I recommend is you guys download Typora, which is a Markdown editor. And Markdown is basically kind of like text to HTML for web content. So Typora, if you saw what Danielle was presenting like the homework with, that was Typora. It kind of like formats everything really nicely. And if you look at this GIF over here, you can use like different, like to bold text. I believe you use 2 asterisks on the ends of the text. But yeah, anyways, you can download Typora at typora.io, and I'll have like a run through how to use it. It isn't necessary, but you can definitely, I guess, use it. I think it'll be easier to format your blog and view your blog. So yeah, feel free to download that. And then next slide. Yeah, next slide.
Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. I guess I can go over the blog outline. So we have the abstract, images, and the other 2 are. So for the abstract, oh, no worries. We have the simple tutorial, which is like where you explain the steps, and then the conclusion. So for the abstract, well, you're basically just going to write a very brief description of your project, maybe around 200 to 250. So you can talk about what your project does, so what you learned and gained from your project, and any unique features you like to highlight. So for these, you can talk about how you customize your clock and how you maybe like chose these different colors or formatted different ways and all that. So you can just write about that in the abstract. And this is a intro to JavaScript camp. So you guys probably learned a lot about JavaScript, maybe even HTML and CSS. So feel free to include that as well. So yeah, there isn't super strict, I guess, outlines or what you have to absolutely include, but these are just ways you can describe your project and everything. So yeah, make sure to include an abstract. And you can also include an image. This is completely optional if you're not comfortable with including an image, but you can include an image of yourself working on the project and or a profile picture. It can be both professional, casual, candid, or pose. And you can find a lot of examples on the Bit Project homepage. So you can go to bitproject.org. Oh, no worries. You can go to bitproject.org and you'll see a lot. The picture on the right is my picture that is on the Bit Project website right now. So that is just me working on a project. But yeah, this is completely optional, so don't worry about it if you don't want to include a photo.
But it would be really cute if you did.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, I'll talk a little bit about the tutorials. So, normally for the other Bitcamp, students are setting up, or I'm sorry, are making their own final project. For the purposes of this Bitcamp, we ended up not doing that. So your final project is literally just like your homework for. So the first thing you're going to want to do, so you're basically just going to be creating a tutorial, but not really a tutorial, just like kind of explaining what you did. I think that it would be weird if I asked you guys to do a tutorial, a step-by-step tutorial, because like I'm basically giving you the step-by-step tutorial by like assigning you the homework. But the first thing you're going to want to do is explain your project, like what it does, how much experience someone would need to like do the same project, and what purpose the project serves. So yeah, just talk about like why you would want this clock, like what its features are and stuff like that. In the homework this weekend, you're also going to be like adding on your own unique features to your clock. So like it's not just going to be a clock, like hopefully you'll add something cool. I'm leaving it up to you. We really hope that you use your creativity and do some research to like really make the most out of it. But no pressure if like you just don't really want to. And then the bulk of the tutorial is going to be just instructions on like building and customizing your project. So like just talk about what JavaScript, HTML, and CSS features you use to build your project and what role they played. Like basically just talk about like what like attributes and like HTML tags you think like made the most impact on your project. Or I wouldn't even put it like that, but I just mean like which were like the like obviously don't like spend a paragraph talking about like the background color. Like focus on like the tools you use to like make your project work and like look the way it does, I guess. And then also just talk about how you customized your project and how someone who wants to replicate your project can tweak it to better fit their preferences. So like you could talk about like some CSS tags attributes that you used that like you thought were really important, and like how someone could use those attributes to like customize it, something like that. And then the end is just going to be a personal reflection, like what did you learn from building your clock, what did you struggle with, and what were your favorite parts of putting it together, and then what future improvements would you like to make, like maybe when you learn a little bit more about JavaScript or HTML or something like that. And then these are some examples. I don't know. You guys can't see the one that I just opened, right? I have to screen share on a new screen.
Yeah, we can't see it right now.
Okay. Here. Okay, so yeah, this one is something that Fifi put together. She works at Bit Project. This is like super in depth. I'm not looking for anything that's crazy because I don't really want a step-by-step tutorial. I just want to know like what you guys learned, what like key elements what you really like took away from this project and stuff. Like I don't expect a super like this is actually very in depth. Like this is amazing. Good for her. But like we're not making like our own custom like final projects. So we'll like leave these links here, but like read them with a grain of salt because we don't expect you to do a lot. I would say that like maybe I don't even know, maybe like a page worth of like text if you're typing it like on Google Docs, like single spaced or so, maybe even less, I don't know. Like yeah, I don't expect like a lot, but those are just some examples. And yeah, does anyone have any questions?
Let's see. And I guess, yeah, just to reiterate what Danielle said, is those blogs are really thorough and they're from other past bit camps. And yeah, we definitely don't expect anything to that extent and to that breadth, I guess, because I guess for those, they made like completely like custom projects and all that. And yeah, we just expect you to kind of talk about what you did to customize it and make it your own, really. And I think a big bulk of it, you can include like screenshots of your code as you're explaining it. So like you can say like how you customize this part of the CSS, you can include a screenshot of that code. So don't worry about making it super long and thorough. That is not at all what we expect. So yeah, just like briefly talk about like what you did to customize it and your personal reflection as well to talk about like how you learned about it, how you learned about this experience and working on this project. So yeah, I guess, does anyone have any questions? Seems like we don't have any questions right now, but yeah, okay. I think that's it. Oh, I have, there are 2 meetings next week that I'll make sure to send it in the Discord, but I believe there's a mandatory public speaking workshop with Chloe on Monday, 2 p.m. PST, so 5 p.m. EST. So that will be mandatory. We'll be sending out more details over Discord. And Danielle and I aren't sure exactly yet what that workshop is about, but apparently it's mandatory for all students. And we'll also be having like a really casual meeting just for our bit camp that Danielle and I will hold. And I'll send out a doodle poll later in Discord so you guys can select which times are available for you and we can find a time next week to meet. But basically, we're just going to kind of like pretty casually present our final projects, what you guys did. You guys can briefly talk about it and what you guys learned and share your experience about the bit camp. But yeah, it'll be really casual and hopefully pretty fun. So yeah, I guess that is all we have for today.
Okay, can't wait to see you guys next week and see all the amazing projects that you made. All right, bye.
All right, bye guys.